Hey guys, on this episode of the Incomplete Guide to Film podcast, we'll be learning about smart passive income and how to find good filmmaking training without going into debt. Hello and welcome to the Incomplete Guide to Film podcast. Our first item of today is smart passive income. So when I say smart passive income, what do I mean? What I mean is simply this: something that you use to make money that takes minimal effort. Something that you make once and then sell a million times. Unfortunately, this wasn't my idea to start off with. I was turned on to this by a guy named Pat Flynn. And this is his whole career. You know, he has a podcast where he teaches people how to make products that they can sell and how to run a business where you don't have to run the business all the time. And I think this is essential for filmmakers, especially right at the beginning. You probably don't have a lot of money to put toward filmmaking equipment. On the blog right now, I am in the middle of reviewing all the gear that I have, and that's probably going to take another month and a half, maybe. And I'm pricing everything out because I'm putting the price along with the review so that people can, see how much it would actually cost to get these things. Because there's nothing worse than seeing this great piece of gear like, oh, I need that so bad. That would be so awesome to have. And then you go and look on Amazon and they go, hey, how's $3,500 sound? Doesn't sound great to me. And my whole setup, as far as I can tell, from how I'm pricing so far, it's going to be somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000 that I've spent on gear. So it's quite an investment. So, and I've got the cheap gear. I've got lights that are cheaper. I didn't get professional stuff. I got the entry level cheap stuff. So, making money that you don't have to worry about all the time is a great way for filmmakers to get that gear and film fun projects, and to subsidize their filmmaking without having to get an outside job and just work that, because I've tried that. I tried getting a minimum wage job right after school, and I was like, okay, I can work on what I want to work on and in my off hours. Well, here's the deal with that. You got to sleep sometime. And me, I work nights, so the first 3 months, my schedule was totally screwed up, and I was sleeping all the time, just sleep and work, and that's all I was doing. So, in my mind at least, working an outside job and then trying to work for yourself doesn't work very well. So here's what I do. I sell stock footage on Artbeats Express and Video Blocks. And I'm working on a couple other ways. I'm working on a couple YouTube channels that might rake in some money. And I'm looking for many sources that I can earn money from. See, the great thing about smart passive income is it isn't a certain thing. It isn't one thing that you have to do You don't have to write ebooks. You don't have to film footage. You don't have to sell, whatever else you can think of. You can sell what you're good at. You take your talents and you turn it into cash. There's all kinds of ways that you can start doing things for people. For me, video blocks and art beats worked out for me. But for others, people with like graphic design expertise, Fiverr might be the way to go. Fiverr is a website where you can get people who are freelance who will do work for you. There's a lot of graphic designers on there who are, ready to design logos and characters and, anything else that you can think of that you can hire, or, people go on there and they can hire you. Another good thing that I found is DeviantArt. DeviantArt, if you draw or paint or do graphic art or sculpt or whatever, artsy thing you do, you could probably even do photography with it. You can put it all on your DeviantArt account, and you can ask for donations, or you can sell prints of your art to people over DeviantArt. And I've even seen, some pretty famous people on there. There was the guy who worked for the guys who did the Maze Runner. He designed the creatures and stuff, and he had 3D sculpture of his design. And he had concept drawings and everything else, and he had a lot of other stuff that he was selling as well. And it was very cool to see someone who's in the industry, who's successful, at least marginally, because they designed things that were used in a feature film. So that I would call that a success. Another one that I'm going to be figuring out in a couple months is Patreon. A lot of people know what Patreon is, but in case you don't, here's an explanation. Patreon is simply a place for people to go who want to support people who make YouTube videos, who have a channel, who do a specific thing. There's people who run gaming channels on there. There's people who make short films, and that's how they get their money, through Patreon. And it's all donations. It's all through it's all your audience, your fan base supporting you. So you can work on what you want to work on, and other people will help you do it. Where they commit, even as low as $1 a month to your channel, and they can support you that way. I considered starting it right now, but honestly, I want to get some good content out there before I start asking people for money. Because I've seen a couple people who have just started channels and then go, hey, here's my Patreon now, but how do you feel about me doing, Patreon? You want to give me money for, the stuff that I do here? And they only have, 5 videos or so. And, it seems kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I just don't like it. And for me personally, I don't think that's the way I want to work. I want to show that I have content that's interesting, that you're going to want to see, but it does take money to support that. Like eventually, I'm going to have to move exclusively to YouTube, because SoundCloud has a limit on their free account where I can only put 180 minutes up there. Eventually, I'm going to have to move to YouTube and stop posting on SoundCloud, but hopefully that'll be after I start making money with all this stuff. So we won't see at least a huge gap in the podcasts on SoundCloud. The cool thing about Smart Passive Income is we have an example of this lifestyle that works. Pat Flynn does something very interesting where he posts his financial statement on his website every month. So you can see exactly how much he's making and exactly where it's coming from. And on average, he makes somewhere between $110,000 and $120,000 a month. And of course, you see more and or less because there's always dips and there's always increase. We have a guy who has a wife and I think he has 2 kids who exclusively works online with stuff that he's already made and he just sells it. You know, that and the podcast. And he's making, if it's not over $1 million, it's pretty close. So this absolutely, definitely works. It's just a time commitment. If you're willing to put the effort in, if you're willing to find ways to put your stuff out there, to get your stuff out there, you can make money outside of the cubicle setup. You know, you don't have to sit at a desk all day. You know, according to Pat Flynn, he spends most of his time with his family. You know, his business maybe takes up, 20 hours a week, he said in an episode a couple weeks ago. So it's definitely a very interesting idea, and I've become a major evangelist for this over the last 3-4 months that I've known about it. And I think that smart passive income is essential for any of our independent filmmakers out there who don't want to have to answer to producers and want to make the film that they want to make. To be able to possibly fund a film exclusively by yourself, independently from anyone else, is something I thought probably wasn't possible unless you had family money. Unless your name ended in Hilton or Trump. So to see that there's a way that even, if it's not one, maybe 5 people, 5 regular people can come together and do this stuff, fund a full-length film is incredible. All right, and our next segment is Netflix reviews. So I've got a couple films on today, and then we're going to talk about February's schedule and some interesting news coming out of Netflix. So our first review is for the film Uncanny. Uncanny is a film about a guy who created an intelligent robot, an artificial intelligence, the same deal that's been going on for a while. There's a lot of movies like this. There's, Terminator and last year's Ex Machina and the next movie that we're going to review. But with Uncanny, it was an interesting film. They made some decisions that I wouldn't have made. But first, we're going to start with pros. It had a very interesting story, so that's a pro. The cinematography I thought was very good. An interesting thing that they did was they had a green filter over almost the entirety of the film. It was very subtle. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. But everything had this sort of greenish hue, which made it sort of eerie and made you uneasy, which was very good for the movie's plot, because you're trying to figure out what exactly this intelligent machine wants. There's a pretty big twist at the end, where things you thought were one way are suddenly another way. And that's the decision I don't think I would have made, or at least made it the way that they did. It felt like a very odd swerve. Where the film was going a certain way and then it takes a 90-degree turn in the other direction. Not necessarily 180. You can see where the path came from, but it's a definite swerve from where I thought the movie was going, and that at least has something for it, because I can usually tell you the ending of a film within the first 20-25 minutes. Another pro is the prop work on this film was incredible. A lot of films, especially sci-fi, you'll look at, whatever they're saying is whatever, and you go, yeah, that's a prop. It doesn't look like it has a practical use. It looks like something that someone made in a prop shop and went, here, that's it. And that's one of the problems that I have with The Force Awakens. The little holocron that that BB-8 has, it doesn't look like it has a practical use. It looks like a piece of plastic or resin that someone made in a prop shop. It doesn't look like, it really has a use. Where in Uncanny, they show a few props off. They show a prototype version of the robotic eye that they used in the robot. They show version of the skin that they use for the robot as well, because it's an android. It's humanoid and it looks human, which is the way they got around, having someone who's all robotic, which is a nice trick for budget sakes, to make your robot be able to be played by an actor. And one of the coolest props, I thought, is they showed off one of the metal or carbon fiber bones that they used in the construction as well. And it looked like it had a use. It looked really slick. It looked really nice. But it also looked like something that someone would make to be useful, not just to look cool. And now cons. The twist at the end was kind of a con for me, because I felt like I was objectively lied to. The best twists in film are the ones that you can see the entire time. Like, if you look at The Sixth Sense, which is very famous for its twist, it's, if you look back and you watch The Sixth Sense a second time, you can see things that didn't hold any importance to you the first viewing in a whole new light because you know the ending. That is what a good twist is supposed to be. Something that was there the entire time, but you didn't realize it. With Uncanny, I felt like I was lied to about it. I tried the same trick. I watched it a second time, and I didn't see much of a difference. I saw certain scenes where they got that, but there were other scenes that they seemed to lie about the ending, which made the ending not make much sense. And then there's also some content that you need to know ahead of time before you go in. There is a bit of nudity in this film, which I wasn't expecting, but it is NR, so you never know. It's not rated, so you can't, basically, a character is watching some stuff on the internet, and it makes sense for the story, but you do see, a girl. So, caution going in. So, there's that. There's also some language. So, there's by the standards that movies are rated, this movie would definitely be rated R. I mean, obviously, because of the frontal nudity. But the language as well, because there were a few F-bombs that were dropped. Other than that, I don't really see any cons. The actors did very well. The director did very well. Except for the twist at the end. I think that they could have done something else, or at least not had the scenes that seemed to ruin it, and it would have been a much better film. So, for me, rating would definitely be R, but my rating for the film would be 3 stars. I liked it. I didn't love it, but it was fine. It was a fine movie. I don't see myself going back and watching it again, but it was at least serviceable. It got the story across. The actors did very well in their roles, and the visual tone was exactly where it needed to be. So for our next film, it's The Machine, which came out in 2015, and it has a very similar premise where someone makes a AI, an intelligent robot, a robot with artificial intelligence, and they're trying to learn how to deal with that. So this one's a very different film, where the other one was more of a thriller drama. This one is a sci-fi thriller with some action in there as well. A scientist creates an intelligent robot, and he's been trying to create robotics as prosthetics for soldiers, because it's in a sci-fi universe where Britain is at war, or at least close to war, with China, and there's all this tension, and they're trying to create a weapon that can defend them, right? So he gets this runaway blacklist military budget, and he uses it to create this robot. But it's conscious, so it doesn't necessarily want to kill. That's the question. I like this film a lot. It the cool thing about it, and about it Uncanny, is it stars a whole lot of people that you don't know anything about. The biggest star in Uncanny is the guy from The Office. I didn't watch The Office, so I don't know his name, but he was in The Office, and then he's also in James Gunn's Super, which is also a very interesting film that I would suggest on Netflix. At least last time I checked, it was still there. But The Machine stars the girl from Arrow, if you've been following that. She plays Sarah Lance. She's also in DC's Legends of Tomorrow now, because that show just started up. But I liked her on the show, and she does a really great job in this film, because she ends up playing a person, and then she also ends up playing the robot, and she plays it very well. The cinematography on this film is great. The digital effects are not necessarily groundbreaking, though there are some scenes that did wow me the first time I watched it. But they're incredible. They're really good. And some of the... Well, for a sci-fi world, the world has to feel complete. You don't have to show everything necessarily, but the world has to feel like it's a world that's lived in. If you saw Firefly, that's a world that feels lived in. If the characters feel like they belong in the world that they're put. And that's the same way with this film. There's some very interesting ideas that I've never seen in a film before that really helped with the world building of The Machine, and I'd love to see what they could do with more. If they ever made a sequel, I'd love to see where they went with it. Now, they do have a lot of things that I never have seen before in a film, but they also have some things that are very, not necessarily cliche, but they're normal for these kind of films. The scientist is working on robotics, and specifically prosthetics for brain damage to fix his daughter, which is a subplot the entire film. It's interesting, and they do some things that they don't usually do with that storyline, but it is something that happens a lot in these kind of films. And it also has the message that I don't really like in a lot of films like this and others, is military bad. The military isn't bad. People are bad, but the military isn't bad. And they do the classic trope of the big government suit wanting to do things that defy nature, and that being evil. Which, I think that some very bad things could be done with big government, but they made it more like, oh no, the military is horrible. Why are you, why are you working with the military? I don't understand. That's a horrible thing. And, it's not a horrible thing. So that's a con. I'm not really a fan of that. But this being a sci-fi movie made in the time that it is, it makes sense for them to have it in there. But, it's still something that I'm not really a fan of. This movie is definitely R as well because of violence. There is some blood, so if anybody's squeamish and doesn't want to see that, they don't necessarily do surgery, but people get stabbed, and it's not pretty. Right in the opening scene too, so it gets you right into what's going on. There's also some implied nudity. I say implied because you don't see any of, the same girl from Arrow. You don't see any of her, bits. You see her, and this is when she's the robot. So she's new. She doesn't understand that nudity is, not, it doesn't understand the concept of needing clothes because it's new. And you see her dancing, and it's dark. And they do this really awesome effect where you see the robotics glowing through her skin, which is really cool. It looks really great. But yeah, so caution language, implied nudity and some violence. But I would say that on the whole, this is probably one of the best movies that I've seen in this genre. Not necessarily of all sci-fi, but of all the, intelligent machine, AI, uncanny ex machina. I would say that this is better than both of those, definitely, because I hated ex machina. I saw ex machina last year, and I just, not great. And that one had a whole lot more nudity because, it was sci-fi, but it was an artsy sci-fi, which isn't my bag either. So, in conclusion, I give The Machine 5 stars. I loved it. It was awesome. I'd love to see a sequel. I haven't heard anything. I've looked up everything that I possibly can to figure out if there's going to be a sequel. But I can't find anything. I don't know if there isn't going to be. I don't know if there is going to be. But a sequel will be very interesting. But if they keep it this one film, that's fine. Because not everything has to have a sequel. And there's a lot of things that don't deserve a sequel that get it. So if this stays one film, that's totally fine with me. And before I move on, we are going to talk about Netflix's February schedule. There are some very interesting things on there. There's the sequel I never thought there was going to be, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny. That, I didn't think they'd ever make a sequel to that movie, but they have. Unfortunately, they also removed the first one. So, hopefully when it gets closer to release on the 26th, they'll add it again. But it's not on the list. I have a list from The Hollywood Reporter, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is not slated for release during February. Even though they had it on there a few months ago, and it was on my list. Because, it's supposed to be this great movie. It's, one of the best foreign films to be released in America ever. It's considered by a lot of people. So, it was on my list. and I never watched it. So I'll have to find another way to watch it before I watch the sequel, and I'll probably review both of them for you on here. Other than that, there's Fuller House, which is a revival of Full House, where they have a couple of the actresses that were in the original show who are coming back to do the show again. I'm not sure how I feel about it. You know, I saw a little bit of Full House when I was younger, but I think it was even reruns then. And, you know, so I don't have a cohesive picture of what it is. You know, I don't know much about Full House. So I don't know how I feel about it. You know, I know that it's a very popular sitcom, but, you know, will this go over very well? I don't know. The last time they tried to do a sitcom was Arrested Development. And I'm a fan of Arrested Development. I really liked the show. Of course, I saw it when it came out on Netflix, you know, after the fact, because I don't have TV. You know, I don't have cable. I don't have TV. I have an antenna, but that's just so I can watch when there's weather stuff going on. So I can get that stuff. You know, I don't think it's even set up on my TV right now. You know, it's hooked up, but I don't think it's even set up. Arrested Development Season 4 is bad. You want to know how bad it is? Season 4 has some flashback scenes where they show you what happened in previous seasons in case you missed it or something, or it's been a long time since you watched it, because I think season 4 came out like 2 years after season 3 ended. So, you know, you sometimes need a flashback. When they do those flashbacks, when they show footage from previous seasons, it has the watermark from Show Stealer Trial Edition on Netflix. They own the rights, and they had to, and they couldn't even spring for the professional version that doesn't have a watermark. It's really, really, really sad. Because I could get those episodes without a watermark. You know? That's a really rookie mistake. But, you know, just without that glaring mistake, the writing was bad. I did not like the episodes that came out. Even though they had some really talented people. Because they had Ron Howard, who of course created the show, but he was actually in the 4th season. They had Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and David Cross and Michael Cera and a whole bunch of other people who are really talented. You know? And I've even liked them in other things. And Jeffrey Tambor. And I want to say Barbara Walters, but that's not right. I can't remember her name. But she's also in other stuff. And, you know, the whole cast is, you know, really famous. Apart from a couple people. But most of the cast are really talented. You know, the whole cast is very talented, but the most of the cast is famous for being so. And it just wasn't great. You know, they even had Ben Stiller in this season 4, and it didn't help. I didn't like his character. I thought that the humor that they had was dumb, and they just didn't get the show right at all. You know, is this going to be the same fate of the Fuller House? I don't know. Honestly, you know, it's too early to tell, and I just don't know. You know, Netflix content has really elevated since then. You know, they've been doing some other comedy stuff. They did F is for Family with Bill Burr recently, which I haven't seen, and they did BoJack Horseman, you know, with Will Arnett, which was interesting. It's a very different sense of humor. You know, some of it is very dry, which, you know, can be fun. You know, it can be funny, but, Yeah, it's very different from a regular animated show like that. But the Netflix content that's been coming out has gotten, Emmys. So, have they learned? I hope they have, because I don't want to see Netflix fail on this. Because, I know that a lot of fans of Full House will be really disappointed if it's just bad. Like Disney's revival of Boy Meets World, Girl Meets World, where they have their kids, and it's just not good. It's really bad. There have been a lot of revivals going on recently of shows that were on when I was younger. Another revival that's happening through Netflix, which we just heard about, so we don't know when it's coming out, is they're going to do a Gilmore Girls revival. But they've got the old cast. They've got Alexis Bledel and what's her name? I can't remember the mom's name. They've got them both. So they're going to do Gilmore Girls, but they're slightly older. So, that's a more recent show. That was out when I was a kid, but it ended, I think, when I was a teenager. So, but I never watched it, so I don't know. I may have to watch at least the first, season or two, because I think it's on Netflix, and then I'll give you a review when that comes out. On the differences between Gilmore Girls then and Gilmore Girls now. So, there's a lot of revivals coming out. Other than that, for February, we don't have a lot. You think they put a lot of content out, because there's a lot of us who don't have a lot to do on the 14th. So, you'd think, but they aren't putting a ton out. The only big name I really saw on there that I was, that was even interesting to me was the Charlie Angels movie, the first one, which I think has Drew Barrymore in it. So that's interesting at least, but I'm probably not gonna watch it. They're just not putting out a lot this month. So, hopefully there will be a better lineup next month. But I know there will be, because that's when Daredevil Season 2 comes out on the 18th of March, which is going to be such a good day. So far, every Marvel series that has come out on Netflix, I've stayed up and started watching at 3 a.m. when it comes on Netflix until it was over. That's right, 13 hours of television from 3 a.m. on. Now, when I watched Jessica Jones, I fell asleep during the last episode, so I had to watch it again. But I'd been up since 3 a.m. I'd been up since, before 3 a.m. So, I really want to give support to the Marvel Netflix series is because they're really well written. So, that's it for Netflix. So, on to our next segment. And for our last segment of today, we're going to be looking at how to get good. Finding good filmmaking training without going into debt. I don't know I don't have to tell anybody this. College is expensive. I have friends who went to college 10 years ago and are still paying off the loans. I have a friend, she went to college 3 years ago for 1 year, and she's, as far as I know, she's still paying it off. College is at a premium. It's more expensive than it's worth in some ways, because I've seen people come out of college with a degree, and people with no degree but experience can still beat them. And in my mind, experience is better than a degree, because a degree says you went through the classes. Experience says that you went through actual life experience to get the skills that you have, which means you learn some things that you can't teach in a class. So for me, I value experience much more. In saying that, well, here's a list at least of some resources that I found that are useful in trying to learn filmmaking. YouTube is a great resource for me. There's a lot of channels dedicated to filmmaking, whether you're into VFX or physical special effects or directing or writing or whatever you're into. There's probably a channel on YouTube that is dedicated to it. A good all-around channel to subscribe to is called Film Courage. If you're listening to this on YouTube, it's one of the featured channels on the channel. And it has some great resources for anybody who wants to get into filmmaking, where they interview people in the industry. They've interviewed UCLA professors and professional actors. They have access to people in the industry, so you can hear what they think. And since they've had experience and they've been in the industry, they've got some very good advice. For those who are into VFX, you can find some great tutorials on videocopilot.com. If you're using Adobe, like Adobe After Effects or Premiere or any of that, well, After Effects mostly, because they make After Effects. After Effects plugins, and you can find a lot of tutorials out there on their website that don't require any plugins. So you can get some really good knowledge, and even watching the ones that require plugins, you can get some good knowledge on how to create effects. For those who are into physical special effects, there's a show on Sci-Fi that you can also access online on their website called Face Off, where it's the regular competition show, like American Idol and all those, except it's for prosthetics, special effects, costumes, characters, and you can see some really interesting stuff on there. And they'll teach you the whole process, and you'll watch people go through it. And they bring on people like Tom Savini, who did the old Romero zombie movies, and he's considered the go-to makeup effects guy. He's the one who's been doing it about as long as anybody alive, at least. So that's incredible. And they bring on actors who have been in prosthetics, and they bring on all kinds of stuff. They bring on all kinds of people who did amazing things, like the guy who did the old man makeup for Brad Pitt in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Yeah, that wasn't digital. I thought it was digital when the movie came out, but a lot of it was physical makeup that he used with some digital manipulation, because they put Brad Pitt's face on a little kid and stuff like that. Wow, that sounds nightmarish when you just say that. So, it's a really good resource. Another great resource that I found is, Netflix has some good stuff on there about filmmaking. They've got biopics of filmmakers, and they've got all kinds of film documentaries. I'll be reviewing some over the next couple weeks probably, so that you can know what's out there, because there's some really good stuff. Another great way to learn things about filmmaking is watch the special features. You love a movie, you buy the movie, watch the special features. No one does that. They'll do behind the scenes. I have, or had, I guess. I had the Ultimate Edition, the definitive collector's edition of the Alien movies. From 79 till 97, before Prometheus came out. And each one of them, it was a 9-disc set. 9 discs, okay? 9-disc set. Each movie came with a special features disc specifically for that film, where they go into detail on everything that they did for the film. And it's some incredible stuff. It's an incredible resource. And if you can get the collector's edition of movies that you like, do it, because you can learn so much from it. Another one that I have is The Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings movie. 4-disc set, goes into everything, and that has some really breakthrough stuff, because that's when they started motion capture. That's when Andy Serkis started motion capture with Gollum, which is used in almost every blockbuster now. Here's an interesting one for those who don't know. Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, there are no animals in those. Well, there are no apes or monkeys in those films at all. All of that is motion capture. Andy Serkis has started a company where he does motion capture for other people. He was Claw. He was the guy that got his arm cut off in Age of Ultron, if you saw that. He's in that film because they were having trouble getting James Spader, who played Ultron. He was having trouble getting it right with the motion capture, so they brought in Andy Serkis, and he's in that film specifically because they needed him to do that. So this is the guy who's the Tom Savini of motion capture, and they go through the entire process. And here's an interesting thing also. Motion capture isn't that difficult. It's a new technology. Not so new, but it's a newer technology. But Blender is a free animation and 3D modeling software. You can do motion capture in Blender. So you can create characters, and then you can do motion capture for them in a free application that you can find on the internet. I'll give you guys a link in the description. You guys can check it out, especially you guys who want to get into 3D characters and modeling and all that. It's a great little resource that you can get for free. And, Blender has even been used by professional companies. Blender was used to make the animatics for Spider-Man 2 back in 2002. So it's been around for over 10 years. And they keep evolving with the times. With it being open source and free, people change the code all the time to make it better. I've had it for 2 years now. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to put as much time as I want to into it. But they put out a new update maybe every 3 to 6 months. Every 3 to 6 months, there is a major change to it. It's really great. They're keeping it up, and the community is the one who's doing it. They don't have to. The people who originally made it don't have to worry about it, because there are people who do coding who want these features, who make it have these features. It's completely customized to the audience that it's being used by. So it's a great little application. As far as I know, it's for Windows and Mac, but don't quote me on that, because I've used Mac when I was in my internship program. I use Mac every day, but I don't use Mac unless I'm forced to, because I'm not really a fan. But the great thing is you can put yourself through film school without going to film school. Oh, here's another one that I forgot. What do they do in a college class? The professor gives you a lecture. There's some hands-on learning, and you'll have a textbook. Those textbooks are available on Amazon and a ton of other places. So you can get the same textbooks that they're using at Full Sail or any other filmmaking program, and you can read through them yourself. For me, I was homeschooled, so it's easy. I know how to self-start. I know how to teach. I taught myself to learn as part of being homeschooled, because you learn how to learn. You learn how to teach yourself. So I think that being self-taught is a great boon to you, because you didn't sit through a class. You didn't have someone spooning it to you, shoving it down your throat. You went out and you got the skills that you have. I know people who are self-taught entirely, didn't take one course, and they're better than people with degrees. They're better at what they do than the people who went to school and got the degree. More knowledgeable, So a degree is important in my mind if you're becoming a lawyer or a doctor, because it's required for what you do. But there are a lot of careers that it's not required. For filmmaking, I don't think a degree in anything is required. To get hired in Hollywood, it might be. I haven't tried to get hired in Hollywood, so I don't know. But a degree in whatever your filmmaking choice is not necessarily required if you can put yourself through that course. All right, and so our featured content for this week is smartpassiveincome.com. This is Pat Flynn's website, and he can teach you a lot better than I can on how to get this thing started. He's got a podcast on SoundCloud. Just look up Pat Flynn and you'll find him. And he's also, or iTunes or whatever your podcast platform is. And he's also got a YouTube channel. That's actually where I did a little podcasting course before I started this, so that I could learn what I needed to know about doing this before I actually just dived in and got started. So with that, we've come to the end of another week. So I hope that you guys found this useful and not incredibly boring. And I will see you guys next week. Have a good week and good filmmaking.